Hey, it's Drybear. Patch 1.0.0.D is out, a hotfix for Path of Exile 2, and this one actually has a lot of people conflicted over what's going on with the balance state in Path of Exile 2, so let's dive into the changes. Now, this patch includes some of the things they were talking about yesterday for long-term, like just get things updated in the game. The first one is passive block chance now applies a blockable hit from all directions as opposed to just the front. So what was happening before is the active block you could block from a direction by aiming your shield, but the passive block was also only blocking from the front, which make a lot of the shield builds feel a little bit weaker, just because when you were trying to deal with damage from directions, if you got surrounded or an explosion hit behind you, you wouldn't have any block from that, so that's going to be fixed up as well. They also changed it so the player size is set to 0, like you have no collision when you dodge roll. This is just to prevent you from being blocked in as often. If the enemies surround you perfectly with no gaps, you will still be blocked in by the enemies. However, it means that if there's any gap of any size in any direction, you can dodge roll through it, which led to some very interesting bugs that come up from this. As a developer, I can tell you making collision 0 is a very risky thing to do, especially when you can get into places using that and then your collision expands again. There's all kinds of issues. So there's people finding ways for you to roll out of the caravan and find outside of bounds and things like that. So hopefully they'll be able to sort all that out. But the goal was for them to be able to like roll out of blocks more often to make it feel better, since a lot of people were complaining about that issue. Additionally, the smaller monsters that are like really tiny, they didn't give a full list of these, but a lot of the really small tiny monsters can be shoved by rolling. So not only can you get out now with a 0 collision, but you can also push monsters out of the way. They mentioned the beetles in Act 2. I'm guessing this is also going to be the larva in Act 1 and some of the little like goobers, whatever you want to call them, in Act 3, little running dudes. Hopefully with those you can just shove them out. Some mobs are just very, very good at like getting around you and surrounding you, depending on how slow you are. They updated the Ascendancy items that you get for the first time. So if you go to the Trial of Secumus in Act 2 or the Trial of Chaos in Act 3, you will get a special green quest version of the entry token to get into that those will give you each 2 Ascendancy points. So that they updated those to, on the item itself, show that you will get Ascendancy by completing this, and then you'll from then on get normal ones. Some people were running Trial of Secumus over and over, wondering why they only got Ascendancy points the first time, or there was just tons of confusion around that. So this text update is going to be quite nice. They removed world map pins for encounters that were not from specific locations in areas, from monster drops or things like that. There was a lot of things on the map that appeared as very important when really they weren't, or you had already done it, which is just confusing a lot of people, so a little bit of cleanup there. And they also improved the attack in place behavior. This was affecting a lot of people, especially in melee. Some monks were complaining about putting a bell down on the ground slightly next to a mob and then accidentally like attack and placing the mob instead of the bell, and things just got kind of odd, so they cleaned that up a little bit. Random arrows and Firestorm now have a hit rate limit to prevent very specific abuse cases. So what they do with these AoEs is they make it so that you can only hit a certain amount of times, which fixes the maximum amount of damage that can come from these 2 abilities. There were situations where with Random Arrows and Firestorm specifically, you're fighting a very large boss. I'm not going to spoil bosses, but like the bosses that are very large and have a big hitbox, you could potentially hit lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of times, effectively just instantly deleting them from the game. So they put a hit rate limit on those AoEs. Leech in general has been buffed. There's actually gotten a lot of feedback from people saying that not only is Leech questionably not even working, or it just isn't very strong. And I think they were just terrified of what Leech could become in the end game, especially with all of the like the keystone nodes of making Leech instantaneous and all of that. They were kind of just being on the cautious side, but I think they're just realizing that in general the Leech just isn't very impressive and doesn't really do a lot. So across the board, Leech has been buffed. They also made it so Bone Shatter hits the target more reliably. I haven't tested in game to see if this is an actually accuracy thing. Even if you're at like a level 1 warrior, it had an accuracy of like 90%, so you would miss pretty often. But also there was just a hitbox problem with it. If you've never played Warrior, Bone Shatter is the ability that allows you to, when a target is about to stagger or heavy stun, you can hit them with the ability causing an AoE, doing a bunch of damage, and also forcing them to heavy stun or stagger. And it just would sometimes completely miss the target. So hopefully this is just more consistent. After this, I'll be able to go test to see if it's they just did accuracy or if they actually affected the ability itself to make sure it hits. They also increased increased the duration of armor break from 6 seconds at base to 12 seconds. 12 seconds is insanely strong. Now, there are some builds that consume their payoff abilities that consume fully broken armor, and the 6 seconds was plenty for those. But the builds that don't, that rely on being able to deal damage when the target has shredded armor, 6 seconds was rather short. Now, there is a support gem that extends the duration of fully broken armor, so I wonder if that's going to be needed as much now. If you have a baseline of 12 seconds when you shred it, it matters a lot more in endgame when you have a lot more armor to shred, but I guess it would depend on the build. They just felt like the people that were using it for the shred purpose and not for consuming the effect just weren't getting enough uptime for the effort they put in to put the fully broken armor on, so now it's going to last by default 12 seconds. To improve performance, Incinerate now creates a circular area of ignited ground instead of segments. If you're playing with any of the elemental spells like Incinerate, there were some FPS issues, I think specifically on consoles, where because it had so many segments on that particle system, it was just causing performance drops. So they just made it one system that's a circle instead of trying to dynamically update it based on these segments that were there. So it's a little bit of improvement cleanup. They also made it so you can control click the currency exchange vendors once you're on cruel difficulty and above. You can already control click the hooded one to automatically identify all of your items, and now you'll be able to control click on the currency exchange to automatically open it up, which is pretty sweet. They added a button to travel to the Trial of Chaos on the world map, and they added some art for the Defiance of Destiny amulet and the close combat support gem. They added Ascendancy skill points as a keyword, so you can search for it if you're looking for it, which details how sets of Ascendancies are obtained, which again helps people with confusion. A lot of people were just running Trial of Chaos over and over, wondering where their Ascendancy was, or wondering how to get it in the first place. So they're just trying to clean that up as a new player experience. They added the search functionality for gem cutting and vendor inventories when using a controller. A lot of people have complained about the gem cutting screen and also just the skill equip screen on console just not being as functional as it is on PC. So it looks like they're trying to make strides there. They added a gem cutting restrictions options for gamepad, so you can do that as well. And they also added suggested supports for time of need, which I guess didn't have them at all. They added an option for opening the trade website to the main menu for consoles, so you're able to go straight to that. Runes now sell to vendors for more gold. Honestly, if you get a rune, you probably should just be trading it unless you're solo self-found anyway, because a lot of players are looking for runes right now pretty regularly. Updated art for reserved life and mana. Updated the description on runes to clarify that once socketed, they cannot be replaced. This was also another confusing point, that once you put a rune into a piece of armor or a piece of like a weapon or something, you can't ever take it out. It's locked in. So they want to make sure that that's updated and clear for people. Auras and curses that affect ally or enemy resistances now display values in the skill pop-up panel. This is a big one. It's super awesome that they're adding this here. I would also, there's a bunch of other things I would love for them to add to the skill panel, like the stat panel, like actual amount of an ailment applied, like a true value, rather than just saying 500% more buildup. It would be great if they had like stun buildup as a value, poison buildup, shock buildup, electrocute buildup, and that way you can compare the applicators for those a little bit more easily. In some cases, crit can be improved, accuracy can be improved, so I hope they just add more and more to those panels so we can actually get more accurate theory crafting on those specifically. And they tweaked the audio of the Kiwi pets, Chimera pet, and the baby Crowbell pet to reduce their impact in town areas. If you were AFK in a town area and you had a whole bunch of pets around, they were making quite the racket, so they'll make less of it now. Updated the wording on the Invoker's Protect Me, Harm, Ascendancy passive skill to clarify its functionality. Updated the description on Hexblasts to clarify that it only detonates a single curse. Updated the description of Fiery Death to clarify that a supported skill does not need to kill the ignited enemy itself, but the enemy just needs to die as long as the support skill is involved using that skill. Reduce the defenses provided by monsters by the Magma Barrier modifier. If you played any difficult like rare mob with Magma Shield, like the Magma Barrier, it sometimes took a large amount of damage to burn through it and cause it to explode, which was kind of ridiculous. They also made the Walking Goliaths no longer use their self-explode attack if they are rare, which was basically one-shotting almost every build. They've also made a very core fundamental change, which targeted some of the more popular builds being used right now from sorceresses and witches. So the general idea here is that they're kind of like repackaging how trigger gems and energy gain work in the game. Previously, you could put like a level 1 support gem that triggers on ignite or cast on ignite or gain energy from it, and that's all you really needed. And they put out a statement saying that they generally don't want you to be using low-level support gems. They actually want you to be leveling up your support gems leveling up your skills and using them at the highest level. They don't intend for you to put little baby gems in your build just to get a certain effect. They want you to have your build leveled up along with that. So to adjust it, what they're doing is they're going to make it so that the trigger effect is reliant upon a monster power stat that they already had in the game, which means that the chance to trigger an effect is going to be higher on a unique monster than it will be on random trash. And the theory here is that it should be very consistent across the board. What was happening is you were getting very high procs on, like, basically procs every single cast on mobs, but then very little procs on unique bosses. So now you should get a very reliable amount of procs of the cast and the triggers on bosses, and then you will be able to get high procs on mobs if there are a lot of normal mobs, because the trigger rate is lower, but there's more of them that you're hitting at once, and so that should attribute to more procs overall. They just didn't like the fact that people were triggering like every single time easily on packs of mobs. They're also changing energy gain to be related to the source of what causes it, to make it more reliant on you maxing out your skills and your jewels to make everything work properly. Like, every part of your build needs to be as high level as possible. So they're making it based on the source of application. In this specific case, the flame wall build with the ignite trigger for the energy gain on that. They're making that based on the source of the ignite itself. So you can't just put in low level gems with your skills to be able to trigger it easily. A lot of this was just around the Infernalist and the like the Stormweaver high level clearing builds that people have been using. So this is like the first big nerf that a lot of people are feeling. And honestly, we'll talk about it in another video, but a lot of people are playing Witch and Sorceress, or having this target one of the best builds in the game right now, just flat out nerfing it. A lot of people are experiencing and expressing frustration over this at the moment. Yeah, posts like this on the official Reddit saying, look, if you want to nuke cast on X builds, I'm fine with that, but I'm level 57. My Sorc is essentially bricked now. I have to start over and make a new one. And so you should just be giving people free respecs. All the resources, they talk about everything they put in. This has over 7,000 upvotes and 2.2K comments on this. So again, we all understand that this is early access. We get it, but having a build like this that is doing really well, that people have spent, last 4, 5, 6, 7 days building permanently, and then having it insanely nuked on a single patch without prep, is causing a lot of frustration. This also goes along with the tweet they put out the other day, which I'm not sure that the first part of this has gone live. I haven't seen any of the notes so far, but they did talk about the adjustment of trigger metagems. So this part is really what they've already put live. But they even talked about in the beginning of this with making it so that Raging Spirits can only summon 5 Raging Spirits per cast at all levels. So some pretty fundamental changes to more things that make people's builds that they were working on kind of moot. They also have ultimatum changes. They're improving the balance across the board with ultimatum monsters, bosses, and modifiers, just to get some, snipe some low-hanging fruit and things that were too difficult. The monster density of ultimatum encounters has been made more consistent. This is helpful for builds that require density to be able to function properly. So when you hit periods where there was no density, it got really weird. Stormcaller runes, blood globules, heart tethers, and impending doom rings no longer spawn while a player is on a lift or near the altars, which led to some very unfortunate deaths in these sequences, because it got to the point where you would just get hit by something for no reason. They also fixed a bug where player minions could get stuck at the top of the lift in the Trials of Chaos. There are actually more of these bugs that they need to keep dealing with, so as long as they stay on top of it, it should start clearing itself out. Then they also did a metric boatload of bug fixes. There are some decently sized bug fixes in here, but just a pretty big list of things to look for. I'll leave a link down below to the patch notes if you want to go check it out yourself and see what they changed. They fixed some pretty nice stuff. A lot of it is for endgame. They're trying to be careful about the story progression for a lot of people, but also trying to fix problems that the blasters and the sweats are figuring out about the core endgame right now. But let me know what you think about the approach to balancing and changing things in the early access right now, and how you feel about the most recent patch in Path of Exile. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.